Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503 Community Media Production. What we're going to talk about this week, just a general overview as usual of the main topics that we'll cover in the lecture and some of the key issues that follow on from last week's lecture. I kind of realised last week was kind of quite general and quite vague, but if you've got, hang on a second. If you've got the Stephen Moore book, Pragmatic Sustainability, then you can be reading through some of the chapters that these discussions relate to. So this is Stephen Moore, Pragmatic Sustainability, which is on the reading list, as well as the other books that are on the reading list. So the kind of key issues that we're going to cover are kind of the way that development and community media as a process of community development and integrated within processes of community development, what are the kind of aims and goals? Well, it's to promote things like equality and to challenge inequality, to think about kind of how models of growth and distribution can be reimagined and done in different ways so that we don't kind of make the mistakes of the past, we make new mistakes. But hopefully it's a sustainable approach which we can learn from, and we can open up to more democratic participation and therefore lead to more social justice. So there's a number of kind of challenges that kind of underpin these. Some of the thinking of kind of how we go about justifying changes in our social structure and social order. What kind of arguments are put forward about that? And we've talked about this in terms of rationalist terms, in terms of exclusively rationalist terms. There's a thought process that's said to take place, which we make assumptions and judgments on the basis of the economic optimum benefit that we receive from that for ourselves and our families, but everything else in terms of social relationships and social engagements and the social provision of the common good is said to follow afterwards from that. So our primary decision-making process, and then the only decision-making process that we need to relate to, is that of private speculation and private gain and private provision of resources, which changes the nature of how we think about social life and what the kind of spheres are in social life. So we live in an age of increased standards of conformity. There's a kind of increased economic inequality, increased social exclusion. There's a massive amount of feeling of social distance. It's harder than ever before to maintain social relationships. And these are very complex issues, and they're often put down to kind of, simplistic answers are often offered. But actually, any solutions that we come up with are going to be a range of complex solutions to deal with complex issues. But sometimes these are hijacked by specialist interests, people who have a professional axe to grind or a professional claim that they don't want to give up and allow other people in. So professionalised journalists, professionalised media people don't want to see ordinary citizens having the voice, because then they'll be out of a job, for good or ill. And in some circumstances we can argue that that's a good thing. In other circumstances, like the decline of local press, we can argue that that's potentially a very bad thing. So being subject to market economics purely as the only tool in the bag to develop social engagement and social goods is a problem. So when it comes to thinking about things like what our social assets are, how do we develop strong voices in those debates? How do we promote a sense of local democracy where people have a real say in the provision of services, and that they can reform and transform people's expectations about what we want from public services and what we want from shared and common resources like transport and heating and lighting and the provision of urban environments that are safe and they're nice places to bring up families, that kind of stuff. So running through this is the notion of social capital, is that there's more to life than just having financial capital, but we also want to encourage and engender our social capital, so we're rich in other ways, our networks of connections, how happy we feel and how much we feel that we belong, The kind of there was some derision of David Cameron in 2010 when he wanted to change the measure of economic prosperity to a measure of economic happiness, not necessarily just economic wealth. And so the kind of the naivety of some of those kind of expectations might be worth revisiting. But in a way, what we're looking for is a kind of sense of social solidarity. And to do that, we have to push back on some occasions against dominant ideologies and dominant ways of thinking. And we can kind of end up, kind of having debates about how we can challenge and reformat ways of thinking, reimagine ways of thinking. And there's a great article, if you get the chance to look at it. George Monbiot in this week's Guardian really is kind of tuned into this kind of debate and put some thought-provoking questions or suggestions that it's well worth looking at. And we might look at that in a little bit more detail as well. If not, we can discuss it on the discussion forum on the discourse group, which is talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. You can talk about wherever you want on that forum. It's our forum. So if you feel as if you want to, maybe not rant and rave, but kind of raise some questions, some academic questions about the status of community media and the status of our politics and those that, feel free. That's what it's for. So I'll see you at the lecture next week.